Focus with Farr, a discussion of national issues that matter to the Central Coast, with 20th District Congressman Sam Farr.
Hello, and welcome to another Focus with Farr. My guest today has been a great friend of mine in Congress for many years, and a great friend to the Central Coast. Congressman Earl Blumenauer from Portland, Oregon. Congressman Blumenauer has served his community in local government like myself, in state government like myself, and also in the House of Representatives. He was a Portland City Commissioner and now a member not only of Congress, but of two very important committees, the powerful Ways and Means Committee, which decides all your taxes and expenditures, and also is on the Budget Committee. He's also been a leader on smart, sustainable planning and all of our transportation issues. And more importantly, he serves as my morning walking partner, so we have to get back to doing that. And I'm really grateful for our daily conversations when we sort of think about how we're going to spend the day on the floor. Earl, welcome to this program. I know we did this many years ago. I'm very fond of you as, I think, one of the most effective members of Congress, and certainly one that understands this nation's politics from the bottom up, probably better than anybody, because you're such a wonk on infrastructure, and particularly this pin, which has now become almost probably international, which is Earl's Bike Caucus. And so he's handed that out to members of Congress and other supporters of those who should ride bicycles like myself, and promoting bikeways throughout our nation, and particularly in our local communities. You know what I think is amazing, you took me to Portland, to your district. And I went to school in Oregon, in Willamette, and I remember going up to Portland. It was an hour away, it was kind of far. And I think it was there pretty much in the winter months. It was pretty dreary, and it was pretty an industrial city, a lot of paper mill plants, logging operations. The air was kind of gray for the winter and full of smells from the pulp mills. And I went back with you, and it was just a totally revamped city, a modern, incredible city with just so much sensitivity to transportation needs, to walking needs, fixed rail, light rail, streetcars, just revitalization of downtown, revitalization of the area, and the incredible transportation implementation you made by putting in a lift.
Oh, the aerial tram?
The aerial tram up to the hospital, because the hospital's in the middle of a residential community, and when the hospital's expanding, the neighborhood didn't want any more traffic, and there wasn't any place to park, and so it was, how are we going to get more people up here and still save the neighborhood? And somebody came with the idea, let's build a tram.
Yep.
And that, I mean, you talk a little bit about that, because what you're so good at is giving the empowering of local people, local governments, just try to solve problems. And right now at the federal level, we're stuck. We haven't done anything to address the national needs in a long time. In fact, you and I are very critical of what's going on in Washington, because we're allowing this country to melt in so many ways, cutting, squeezing, and trimming, and not authorizing funding, and sort of, we're not fixing things, we're not building things, we're just stuck right here.
Agreed.
Give us some hope.
Well, first of all, I appreciate the invitation to have a conversation with your constituents at home. I've appreciated the courtesy where you've invited me to your gorgeous district, and I think part of how our friendship and our partnership has developed is we have so many common interests. You, as you mentioned, were sort of an Oregonian in exile, and you went to college in Oregon. We have two really spectacularly beautiful districts. We have constituents who care deeply about making sure that we maintain quality of life, environmental protection. I look to you for leadership dealing with things from helping the military clean up after itself, to being able to have a system of agriculture that works for people, not just large industrial operations. So it's been fun in our partnership here in Congress. In the fall, on September 12th, in Portland, Oregon, we are going to open the largest bridge in North America with no automobiles. It's going to be just bus, streetcar, light rail, pedestrian, and bike.
Wow.
And this bridge is anchored in the spot that you mentioned. One end of it is going to be where that aerial tram takes off. And it's sort of a symbol of how Portland put the pieces together to be able to get more value out of each dollar invested and each acre of land. We made a decision in Oregon back when we were both getting started in politics. I was a child member of the Oregon legislature, where we created a statewide comprehensive land use planning system. Every square inch of Oregon is planned, zoned, and mapped. We've established urban growth boundaries.
Yeah, we haven't done that in California yet.
Although you've done some things on a local level that's kind of interesting, and what you've done with the Coastal Commission that I know you've fought to protect has great merit. But we've been able to, with the urban growth boundary around Portland and the adjacent cities, we made a decision 40 years ago that we were not going to dig deep ditches through the city of Portland for more freeway lanes, but instead established a light rail system as the backbone. And it's gone northeast, west, and south to the airport. Now we're opening a new rail line this September 12th. We've introduced something I'm very proud of, the first, we like to call it the first modern streetcar, where we've put a line in, extended it 4 times, have another line that connects to the other side of the river. Portland is bisected by the Willamette River. And now on September 12th, we're going to connect those 2 rail lines across this bridge. Being able to put the pieces together, Sam, in a way where we're trying to make sure that we have the right land uses, where we make sure that things are planned so people don't have to burn a gallon of gas to get a gallon of milk, that there are more choices for how people get around.
Well, I think that is key, this idea of choices, because, I mean, you have the critical mass of a big city like Portland that we don't have in the rural areas, but we still have that needed density. It's not, you know, revenue-wise, it isn't the density that allows for big structures, but it's essentially a density that wants to keep itself within sort of limit lines conceptually. We haven't, in some cases, and we haven't really formed it. I think Santa Cruz County's done that, but not Monterey County. And yet we need to get from one place to another, from one city to another. And so what we're looking at is the alternatives of bicycle traps and of rail and obviously the road system that we have. The problem is, for all of these things we need to do, we ain't got no money. And you've got, I mean, it's remarkable the amount of money you've gotten for Portland, because these things weren't done without your ability to...
Part of it, and it's something that you and I both feel strongly about, is that it is important to have a plan, to know what you're doing, to be able to tie the pieces together and explain, whether people live in a large community or a small community, what's in it for them, that they have control over these decisions. I think it's absolutely essential that we give people these choices to be able to move freight. And we had a great meeting at one point in your district talking to some of the agricultural interests who were concerned about being able to move product, being able to make sure that that within the community that it's safe for kids to bike and walk to school on their own, not being forced to be driven. Being able to make sure that as we deal with roadways, that we don't chop them all up so that it impedes the flow of traffic. These are fundamental principles that we can do a better job, and it starts, I think, having a local vision, getting people aligned, focused on what the needs are, because if we have our act together at the local level with planning and zoning, it helps you secure federal money and represent your community before the state legislature and your state transportation commission?
Well, a lot of, I think, self-help actions, too. I'm a big believer that we've got to build workforce housing right near where the jobs are. I grew up in a town in Carmel where everybody who lived in that town worked in that town. They owned the stores and they worked for the people that owned the stores. Nobody thought about commuting just to the next town, the Monterey Peninsula. And now our housing prices along the California coast are so high that the workforce, the young working families, can't afford to live there. And they have to live 50, 60 miles away and commute every day. And that's a limited amount of space on those roadways. So their car of commute is sort of blocking the car that might be coming in for tourism, or the truck that may be getting out with agriculture. We have a really in and out economy, and tourism in and agriculture out, and it is all road dependent. So how do we alleviate some of that congestion by just getting people to live closer to work, where then they might have these options of walking to work or driving a very short distance but not being on the freeways to do it. So
Absolutely.
I mean, what I find, I think we do have a lot of the ideas, some sort of smart, because we're all talking about these things. The problem we're having now, and this is what you're right in the middle of this, is what's going on with our investment in infrastructure in America. I mean, our highway plan, which used to be very big politics back here, and people couldn't wait to get to the next sort of so-called highway bill, transportation bill, for all that investment and jobs that would come out of it and the benefit to the communities. We've been just kicking the ball down the road, and we haven't put any new revenues into it. How many times have we voted to extend the transportation plan on the day it's about to fall apart?
Well, this spring, in May, we voted for the 33rd short-term extension. And you and I have joked about this. What country became great building its infrastructure 9 months at a time? We haven't raised the gas tax in 22 years. So we're trying to pay for 2015 infrastructure with $1993. It doesn't work. That is why I think it is so important that we zero in on just what you said. America is falling behind while it falls apart. When we were growing up, Sam, America had the finest infrastructure in the world. Roads, freeways, water and sewer, aviation. We even had passenger rail. And now no one's going to confuse what we have in the United States with the finest in the world. We slipped from #1 down to, depending on what chart you look at, some of them put us at 25th or 27th. The Chinese invest 4 times as much as we do as a percentage of their economy for infrastructure as the United States, and they've been doing that for 20 years. 6 years ago, there was no high-speed rail in China.
None?
None. This year, Chinese high-speed rail will move more passengers than the entire American aviation system. These are things we can and should do, but it's important that we step up and provide the resources to be able to get the job done.
Well, there's no free lunch. You have to invest. And it's interesting because we have some big construction companies, highway construction, Granite Rock, Granite Construction in my area, Fortune 500 companies. I was really surprised to hear their leadership coming back here and talking before the Ways and Means Committee several years ago about urging a $1 increase in the national gas tax. I mean, they knew we would compromise on something. But here was the industry, and they had the Trucking Association helping them. So it wasn't that the resistance to gas tax was coming from the people who pay the most of it. It was that we want the infrastructure. We can't make a living without this infrastructure being in top-notch shape, and we want to solve these problems. So the politics, what do you think is just this mentality that we don't want to invest? We can't find a solution to a revenue source for our transportation.
Well, I have taken advantage of my position on the Ways and Means Committee and introduced the first gas tax increase in 22 years. And my proposal would raise just a nickel a gallon for 3 years. It would be over $200 $100 billion extra dollars for the decade, and we'd be able to have a real, robust 6-year reauthorization that would be able to deal with transit, with freight, with road activities, bike and pedestrian. It's interesting, the coalition that supports my legislation ranges from the U.S. Chamber to the AFL-CIO. It is truckers and AAA. It is construction firms, engineering firms, transit. It's a wide array of groups and organizations. I think it's the broadest coalition for any major controversial issue here in Washington, D.C.
So with that kind of coalition, why can't we get the job done? What are the politics that are stopping this?
Well, it's a bipartisan failure of will, I think. I campaigned for President Obama. I believe that he sincerely supports infrastructure investment, and he did some in the Recovery Act. But initially, at least, he was opposed to raising the gas tax. Republicans feel it's an article of faith that you don't raise any taxes, despite the fact that President Reagan, in his Thanksgiving Day speech, November 29th, 1982, called on Congress to come back from the Thanksgiving recess and more than double the gas tax. And Ronald Reagan and Tip O'Neill did that, raising it from 4 cents to 9 cents. But lately, Republican friends were not interested in moving it forward. The Obama administration, until recently, has been sort of hostile to it. They're now just lukewarm. The politicians in Washington have been, I think, too gun-shy. But it is interesting, already this year, 6 Republican red states have raised the gas tax. Utah, Idaho, Iowa, Georgia, South Dakota, and just in May, Nebraska legislature overrode a Republican governor's veto of a 6-cent gas tax increase. So at the local level, Republican state legislatures have figured out we need to do it. It's a gas tax as a system works. It'll get the job done. And people who kind of bite the bullet and make tough decisions routinely get reelected. They don't get defeated over this.
Tell me something exciting that you've done. I mean, you have been this passionate, almost a guru in this country on bicycle transportation. What are your sort of proudest accomplishments? I'm sure a lot of them are in Portland.
Yeah. I will forever be proud of ramping up Portland's award-winning bike program when I was Commissioner of Public Works. And today we have one of the finest bike systems for any community in the country. There are neighborhoods where more than 10% of the trips are by bicycle. It's the highest percentage of any large city in the country. It rivals what you see in some college towns. Here in Washington, D.C., I will tell you, every time I ride my bicycle up Pennsylvania Avenue, it makes me smile.
Well, I remember you, and you got me out on a bike when we inaugurated the new bike lanes.
Wasn't that an exciting day?
It was exciting, and the turnout was huge.
People were there having an opportunity to cut a ribbon on a bike lane in the middle of maybe America's most famous avenue, and is a symbol of what we can do to just go ahead and take advantage of existing pavement. You know, in many communities, we have roads that are actually larger than they need to be, with wider shoulders and turning radius. We've got all sorts of pavement, asphalt for parking lots, a chance to use what we've got more effectively, and the bicycle helps us do it.
You know, my district, particularly Santa Cruz, with all the mountains, and has become sort of the mecca for off-road biking, for mountain biking. And I was really surprised to learn that we have a lot of manufacturers, parts manufacturers, helmet manufacturers, paraphernalia, bicycle frames, and the whole bike. And these shops collectively in our area, including a little bit of the Los Gatos area of Santa Clara County, it's a $1 billion business. And they have formed their own sort of nonprofit associations to go out and improve these bike lanes, because they know that bike paths in the mountains,
Yep.
doing their own work, hiring people to do it, because they know our state park system and our county park systems are strapped for money. So they're taking on the responsibility of building these mountain bike lanes, and and attracting an awful lot of people to use them. So I think there's a real keen interest, and what bothers me is that, you know, the lack of leadership here in being that sort of the grandparent of helping all these passions be implemented, and it leaves it up to then communities backing up against the wall and having to raise their own taxes, and you know how difficult it is from one county to another to do that.
But part of what you've done, continuing a family tradition with your father as a state senator and then an official in the Johnson administration, being so attuned to the power of scenic highways, of tourism, putting these pieces together, and you continue to champion that in a way that I think is exciting. You've put your finger on something here. Being able to have this bike infrastructure that's more friendly attracts people who like to bike. It brings in the businesses. It brings in the tourism. I'm not surprised in your gorgeous community with all of these things going on that it has $1 billion economic impact. In Portland, we're pushing 175 bike-related companies. We ship product all over the world. Bike tourism in Oregon and in California is a tremendous attraction. But you have people who design cycling apparel, cycling components in both our communities. And this is an economic impact that really has very little impact on the environment. This is not something that has a grim carbon footprint. It's not polluting. People don't get upset living next to bike shops. Yeah. It is, I think it's been spectacular in both our communities.
Well, I hope in my lifetime we'll be able to complete this trail around Monterey Bay.
Yeah.
It's about 60 miles and we've got parts of it done. It's just connecting the dots, and that is an investment of money. And again, we already have people signed up and nonprofits adding to, because government just isn't there to get the job done, but people want it done.
But you've had a plan. You have been focused on this for decades. And slowly but surely, the pieces are being, in fact, being filled in. And I think your vision is one of being opportunistic when there's a donation, when there's a grant, when there's a federal project where there's a little bit that you can fill in. And people can see what's coming, and they can also enjoy a lot of what you've already done. I think it's really cool.
Well, you know, where I really got converted, we took an old rail line that went all in Monterey County along the shoreline around on the peninsula, went between the city of Monterey and Pacific Grove, and in the middle of that is Cannery Row. And in Cannery Row is the aquarium and lots of restaurants. This path, bike path, walking path, attracts more people than our biggest attraction, which is the Monterey Bay Aquarium. More people are on that trail.
Wow.
And so I think project that around Monterey Bay, you open up a whole new dimension of tourism, because you give people access to places where there are no roads, right along the shoreline, all kinds of great interpretation, great place for families to go for the moment, you know, just a short ride, or for a long ride. And I just think it's going to be the biggest economic boon. You wouldn't think that investment in a bike trail, you would, but a lot of people don't realize that might be the best economic investment we could ever make.
What's been very interesting to me to see what's happened in other parts of the country. We both know a guy named Hobson. We served in the Congress with him. Yeah. He voted for a bike path when he was early in his career, and he was excoriated. This should be built for roads and bridges. And one of the papers in a small town just was screaming at him, just really on his case. And within a few years, that same small town had changed its city seal so that that bike path was incorporated into it. And in Houston, Texas, in the fall of 2012, I was there campaigning, trying to get a better Congress, but I did some work on a campaign with the mayor of Houston for $200 million.
You know, my cousin was on the city council.
Absolutely.
And an architect planner.
And Mr. Brown was great.
Yeah.
He was a part of these conversations. It passed overwhelmingly, and that new bike infrastructure was the #1 achievement in the eyes of Houstonians for the re-election of Mayor Parker.
Wow. So it's good politics, just why, you know, it's putting together the critical mass here of votes, and we could really launch this country, not just in this biking we're talking about and hiking, but everything, every kind of rail and harbor and airports, everything. Obviously, this is going to be the biggest concern. I mean, it isn't the issues around the world that people are asking me about when I go home. They're asking me about traffic jams, about commuting times, about access. These are the real issues that are top-notch politics in our local communities, and I think it's shameful that Congress can't come together and reauthorize what we've done so many times.
Well, I look forward to working with you yet this Congress, Sam, to maybe have Congress step up and undertake its responsibilities, because I couldn't agree more with what you said. This is our responsibility for our children, our grandchildren, and those who come after us to be able to rebuild and renew this great country. We know what to do. Local governments want it. Local citizens care about it. And I think we can develop the sort of partnership to carry it across the finish line.
Well, we just have a couple more minutes, but if for viewers that are listening to this, what are a couple of examples of cities that you've seen that just have some marvelous wows in their either walking or riding or even automobile transportation?
I would just say that the examples are more than I can count in the next 10 minutes, and I know we've only got about a minute left, but things that are going on in New York City, here in Washington, D.C., in Denver, bike agendas in Seattle. Philadelphia put its marbles on a Tiger grant for regional bike lanes. And the Republican mayor of Indianapolis will give a spellbinding presentation about what their investment in bike infrastructure has meant for the city of Indianapolis.
And certainly your home city, Portland, Oregon, is a model not only in bikes, but in light rail, in highways, and in everything, including funiculars. So I'm glad you had this time to share with me. I'm very fond of your passion and leadership in Congress. I just hope that we can get that passion into some legislation that can get passed and signed.
Well, I appreciate the invitation for the conversation. I always enjoy thinking with you out loud about these items. I hope you'll give me a visa so I can go back to your community and watch what's going on the ground, and maybe we could do a little something at home that talks about your vision for the Monterey Bay trail connection. I think it'd be fun.
We can also share the great wines of Oregon with the great wines of California. That would be a wonderful opportunity to exchange. You're invited.
Super. Thanks, Sam.
Thank you. Thank you for being on the program. And thank you very much for watching Focus with Farr.
Learn more about Sam Farr's work in Congress or share your views at farr.house.gov or follow him on Facebook or Twitter.